picture this. You and your partner have finally decided to get married.
Oh, that's exciting.
Right. You have the rings, the venue is all picked out, your families are thrilled. But to actually get the legal piece of paper that says you are legally wed, your own government forces you to go to the airport.
Wait, like literally pack a bag?
Literally. You have to board a plane, fly out over the Mediterranean to the island of Cyprus. You land, you take a cab to a local municipal office in Larnaca, sign a document in about, 11 minutes.
What, 11 minutes?
Yeah, and then you just turn right around and fly home. You don't live in Cyprus. You aren't Cypriot. But doing this is the absolute only way your marriage will be recognized by your home country.
That sounds like a complete bureaucratic nightmare.
It really does. But for countless couples from places like, Lebanon or Israel, this is just a normal Tuesday. And the reason you have to do this, well, you are navigating your 21st century love life using a rule book written by an Ottoman sultan who has been dead for over a century and a half.
Which is just wild to think about.
Totally wild. So today, we're taking you on a custom-tailored deep dive. And our mission is to completely reframe how you make sense of the modern Middle East. We aren't going to look at yesterday's news. We're going to look at the 600-year-old administrative machinery that is actually still quietly running beneath the surface of the region today.
Yeah, and the guide for our exploration today is a truly fascinating book by Peter Kriger. And I have to say right up front, what is so completely new and original about Peter Kriger's work is his entire analytical framework.
Because usually people just look for someone to blame, right?
Exactly. When most observers try to untangle the history of this region, they go searching for a convenient villain, or maybe some grand colonial conspiracy, or they just throw their hands up and blame ancient, blood-deep religious hatreds.
Right, the whole they've been fighting for thousands of years narrative.
Yes, exactly that. But Peter Kriger rejects all of that. What makes his approach so groundbreaking, and what's really new and original about Peter Kriger's work, is that he examines history the way a systems analyst looks at a structural failure report.
Oh, I love that analogy, a systems analyst.
Right. He introduces this incredibly original concept that the Ottoman Empire didn't just leave behind a cultural memory. It left behind a fully functioning legal and administrative operating system. And it's still, actively issuing instructions from the shadows today.
Okay, let's unpack this, because usually when we think about ancient empires falling, we picture ruins. Like if you look at the Roman Empire, you think of marble statues, old Latin mottos, maybe a crumbling aqueduct.
Yeah, a tourist attraction.
Exactly. We treat it as a subject of historical curiosity. But Peter Kriger introduces this highly original distinction. The Ottoman past isn't a metaphor. It isn't just a pile of ruins. It is genuinely operative.
Operative, that's the key word.
Right. It is literally still sitting in the filing cabinet.
And that contrast with Rome is just the perfect way to understand Peter Kriger's entirely original thesis. I mean, Rome fell and became a subject for academics and poets. Nobody in modern Europe writes a letter to the Roman archive today to settle a property line.
No, of course not.
Right, because there is no Roman clerk whose handwriting governs modern European law. But the Ottoman Empire is a completely different story. In Istanbul today, there is a massive archive constantly receiving mail from modern corporate lawyers across a dozen sovereign countries.
Wait, really? Modern corporate lawyers are writing to an Ottoman archive?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because they urgently need to know who owned a specific patch of dirt in, say, 1880. An Ottoman clerk's ledger entry from 140 years ago legally determines who gets to build a shopping mall on it right now.
That is insane. Which brings us right back to those couples frantically booking flights to Cyprus. It's like running a brand new, ultra-modern society on an operating system coded in the 1500s.
That's exactly what it is.
So why hasn't anybody just updated the software?
Well, updating the software would require an enormous political war that no modern state really wants to fight. Peter Kriger points out that this marriage workaround is a direct, completely untouched inheritance of the Ottoman millet system.
The millet. Okay, how did that actually work?
So let's look at the mechanics of how the Ottoman Empire actually functioned. They had this enormous territory, right? With tens of millions of multi-confessional subjects.
Right, lots of different religions living together.
Exactly. Managing the intimate personal lives of all those different groups, who can marry whom, how divorces are handled, who inherits the sheep when a grandfather dies. That would require a massive centralized bureaucracy.
And I'm guessing the Ottomans didn't want to pay for all that overhead.
They absolutely didn't want that expensive overhead.
So they outsourced it.
They completely outsourced it.
Yeah.
They delegated all of family law to the religious clergy of each individual community. So the local rabbi, the local priest, or the local imam became the state's actual administrative agent for personal law.
Okay, I see.
So fast forward to the 20th century. The empire collapses, and these modern successor states emerge. The new secular governments arrive and realize that, well, if they want to create a unified civil law, they have to strip all of that legal power away from the religious authorities.
And I'm guessing the religious authorities were not about to just hand over the keys to the kingdom.
Oh, not without a massive internal conflict. Nationalizing family law would have triggered civil wars.
Right.
So these fragile new states simply backed away. They left the 500-year-old Ottoman delegation system entirely intact.
Wow. So if a modern citizen wants a secular marriage or wants to marry someone of a different faith, their local system literally cannot process the request.
Exactly. It's a system error. They have to step outside the Ottoman software entirely, which means a flight to Cyprus.
It's incredible to think about the everyday friction that causes for people. And it's not just personal relationships being governed by this old software, right? It's the literal ground beneath their feet.
Oh yeah, land is a huge part of this.
To really grasp this operative past that Peter Kriger documents, we need to talk about the 1858 Ottoman Land Code. Now, a quick caveat for you listening. Looking at the historical mechanics of this is fascinating, especially when you detach it from modern political rhetoric.
Right, this is purely historical.
Exactly. We are explicitly looking at this purely through the lens of Peter Kriger's historical administrative analysis, without taking any sides whatsoever in the modern Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We're just examining the original source code.
And the source code itself is where Peter Kriger's original analysis really shines. In modern courtrooms today, dealing with incredibly high-stakes land disputes in the Negev or the West Bank, you will find modern judges and lawyers actively consulting the articles of this 1858 code.
That is just surreal.
It is. Specifically, the courtroom debates often hinge on a highly specific Ottoman legal category called mawat, which roughly translates to dead land.
Yeah, the definition of dead land is what absolutely blew my mind when I was reading this because, they didn't have satellite mapping or GPS back then.
Yeah, definitely not.
So Peter Kriger explains that in 1858, dead land was legally defined as uncultivated ground that lay beyond the carrying distance of a human voice from the nearest village.
Yes. Picture a 19th century Ottoman tax official physically standing at the very edge of a village's outermost house.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
He shouts at the top of his lungs. The exact invisible line where his voice fades into silence is the legal boundary. If the land is beyond that acoustic limit, it belongs to the imperial state.
So today you have lawyers in sleek, modern courthouses dealing with 21st century territorial conflicts, bringing in historical acoustic experts to argue over how far a Turkish bureaucrat's shout could carry on a windy day in 1858.
That is exactly what happens.
The ghost isn't just haunting the hallways. The ghost is actively sitting on the judge's bench, banging the gavel.
And this reveals the depth of what is so completely new and original about Peter Kriger's perspective. He shows us that administrative categories never really die. And if the imperial state was that meticulous about categorizing the acoustic boundaries of a field, you can imagine how meticulously it categorized the human beings living inside those borders.
Right, which shifts us from how the empire managed dirt to how it managed identity. In a Western democracy today, your primary political identity is usually tied to geography, right?
Yeah, you are a citizen of the territory you live in.
But Peter Kriger's new and original research shows that the Ottoman state used a completely different filing system for humanity.
They really did.
Yeah.
In the Ottoman system, your legal address wasn't a street or a province. Your legal address was your religion.
Your religion was your address.
Exactly. You weren't, for example, a Syrian who just happened to attend a Catholic church. The state viewed you fundamentally as a Catholic who simply happened to reside in the geographic zone of Syria.
That is a massive distinction.
It changes everything. The empire interacted with you exclusively through the lens of your confessional identity.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because this brings up a physical manifestation of this identity system that sounds like it belonged in a comedy sketch.
Oh, the latter.
Yes, the latter.
Yeah.
Above the main entrance to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, there is a simple, unremarkable wooden ladder sitting on a ledge. And that ladder has been sitting on that exact same stone ledge for over 300 years.
It's amazing. You can actually pull up historical engravings from the year 1728, and the ladder is sitting right there,
Yeah.
in the exact same spot it sits this very morning.
See, I have to push back slightly here. because as someone living in the 21st century, my immediate instinct is just move the ladder.
Right, just pick it up.
Honestly, if I'm walking past and it's an eyesore, I'm tossing it in a dumpster. Couldn't someone just move a wooden ladder? Isn't this just a case of extreme comical stubbornness between the 6 different Christian denominations that share the church?
Well, our modern brains naturally interpret it as stubbornness. But what is so entirely original about Peter Kriger's work is how he completely flips that assumption.
So it's not just them being stubborn.
Not at all. And it's a highly specific, legally binding Ottoman conflict management tool known as the status quo, which was locked into place by an imperial decree in 1852.
Okay, how does that work?
To understand this, you have to look at Ottoman property logic. Under their legal framework, performing maintenance on a structure, even something as simple as sweeping a dusty step or moving a ladder left behind by a careless stonemason, is viewed as a legal claim of ownership over that space.
Ah, I see. If I fix your roof, I am establishing a legal footprint on your property.
Exactly. So if a Franciscan monk moves the ladder, the Greek Orthodox clergy view it as an aggressive, legal annexation of the ledge.
Oh, wow. So that is the exact mechanism. Moving the ladder forces a legal crisis, therefore nothing moves.
Nobody touches it. Peter Kriger's original analysis points out that this was a genuinely brilliant, if incredibly rigid, administrative tool. The Ottoman center didn't waste resources trying to untangle or resolve the deep, centuries-old theological disputes of its
They
subjects.
just froze them.
Yes. They just managed the friction by freezing the environment perfectly in place. Nobody could score a victory, but crucially, nobody had to suffer the humiliation of a defeat. It's a bureaucratic mechanism for holding a volatile dispute permanently open without allowing it to escalate into violence.
The latter is essentially a wooden monument to a frozen conflict. Internally, that makes a terrifying amount of sense. It keeps the peace.
It does.
But it raises a massive, glaring contradiction. If the Ottoman provincial system was so incredibly adept at managing these complex internal tensions without them exploding, why are the modern successor states so frequently engulfed in international crises?
This question leads to what is perhaps the most new and original argument in Peter Kriger's entire body of work. He introduces a concept he calls the fatal deficit.
The fatal deficit.
Right. The Ottoman Empire was a masterclass in teaching internal administration. It taught its local provincial leaders exactly how to collect taxes, how to run local police forces, and how to operate municipal courts.
But they held something back.
They absolutely strictly forbade those same provinces from ever learning the outward-facing skills of statehood.
When you say outward-facing skills, you mean the mechanics of acting like a real country on the global stage.
Precisely those mechanics. Peter Kriger identifies 4 specific competences that were heavily guarded: diplomatic recognition, the making of treaties, the declaration of war and peace, and the ability to borrow money from foreign banks.
So they were basically kept on a short leash.
Very short. These 4 tools were locked in a vault in Istanbul. Autonomy in the Ottoman world was not a gradual rehearsal for future independence. It was a strict bargain. You were granted the freedom to manage your internal streets, specifically on the condition that you never ever learned how to speak for yourself to the outside world.
Let's ground this for a second. Can you give us a concrete historical scenario where we see this rule being violently enforced?
Yeah, the clearest example Peter Kriger provides is the case of Mehmed Ali in 1840. He was the very ambitious governor of Egypt, and he didn't just build a few roads, he fundamentally modernized Egypt.
He was a big deal.
Huge deal. He built a massive European-style standing army. He introduced cash crop cotton to industrialize the economy. He founded medical schools. In every practical sense, he built a highly functioning, modern state machine.
But I'm guessing Istanbul didn't like that.
Well, the very moment Mehmed Ali tried to act like a sovereign nation and conduct his own independent foreign policy, the ceiling collapsed on him. And he wasn't just reprimanded by the Sultan. He was militarily crushed by a coalition of European superpowers. Britain, Russia, and Austria all intervened.
Wait, why did the European powers care if the governor of Egypt was signing treaties?
Because a fractured, declining Ottoman center in Istanbul was much easier for Europe to manipulate than a rising, dynamic, independent Egyptian superpower.
Oh, of course.
Right. So the European powers stepped in to ensure Mehmed Ali remained a subservient provincial governor. They forced him back into his administrative box.
The message is clear. You are allowed to build all the factories you want, but the second you try to build a foreign ministry, we will destroy you.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the historical conditioning of that is profound. Think about what happens when the Ottoman Empire finally collapses into dust after World War I.
Right, these provinces wake up one morning and suddenly find themselves labeled as modern nations.
Yes, but their leaders have absolute zero institutional memory of diplomatic practice. They have never sat across a table and negotiated a complex treaty with a geopolitical equal.
So what happens when a politician with no experience negotiating with equals gets into trouble?
They fall back on the exact administrative reflex they have been conditioned to use for half a millennium. They write a petition and seek out a powerful foreign patron to arbitrate for them.
I want to emphasize this for you listening. This is the master key to understanding the news today. This is why a highly localized dispute over a municipal budget or a tiny border crossing in the region instantly escalates and attracts the attention of foreign superpowers.
It's ingrained.
It isn't necessarily a story of deep-seated malice. It is an ingrained structural reflex to seek an outside sponsor because that is literally the only diplomatic language the operating system ever provided them.
The operating system left them totally unequipped for external statecraft. And this lack of diplomatic agency brings us to the actual physical borders of these states, which is an area where Peter Kriger completely demolishes the standard historical narrative.
Yeah, usually when people debate the messed up borders of the Middle East, all the blame gets placed entirely on the Sykes-Picot Agreement.
Oh, definitely.
We all know the story, right? The map with the arbitrary red and blue lines drawn in the sand by British and French aristocrats holding rulers.
The myth of the entirely arbitrary lines in the sand is everywhere. But what is completely new and original about Peter Kriger's take here is that he reveals something far more damaging.
It wasn't just arbitrary lines.
No, Sykes-Picot wasn't just random scribbling. In many critical places, the British and French actually traced their new national borders directly over the old Ottoman internal tax districts and municipal boundaries.
Which, when you think about it, actually makes the situation infinitely worse.
Exponentially worse. If an imperial power draws a completely random line through an empty desert, the people living there might just ignore it.
Right. It means nothing to them.
But when you elevate an old tax district boundary into a militarized national border, you are weaponizing a line that has just enough internal administrative logic to be violently defended by bureaucrats, but absolutely zero cultural or national legitimacy for the human beings trapped inside it.
And Peter Kriger points out the map wasn't even the worst part. The real historical scandal, according to Peter Kriger, was the promises made around the map.
Oh, the promises were a disaster.
And again, for you listening, I want to remind you that we are neutrally conveying Peter Kriger's historical account of these wartime promises here, remaining entirely impartial regarding any modern left-wing or right-wing political interpretations.
Right, just sticking to the documented diplomacy.
Exactly. Framing this purely as a historical failure of imperial diplomacy, Britain managed to make 4 completely incompatible promises regarding the exact same stretch of territory in the span of just 26 months.
The diplomatic malpractice is staggering. To secure military support, they explicitly promised independence to the Arab leadership to trigger a revolt against the Ottomans.
Okay, that's one.
Simultaneously, they secretly promised that exact same territory to their French allies in designated spheres of influence.
2.
Shortly after, they issued the Balfour Declaration, favoring the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in the region.
3.
And while juggling all of this, they publicly promised the global community that any post-war governments would be based entirely on the free, democratic choice of the local indigenous populations.
4 fundamentally contradictory promises made to 4 different groups regarding the exact same plot of land. It is a masterclass in manufacturing permanent grievance. But wait, didn't the mandate period under Britain and France give these new states time to learn how to be countries?
Well, this is what Peter Kriger so originally identifies as the mandate illusion. The mandate period didn't teach anyone independence.
So what did it do?
All the French and British did was step into the dead Sultan's shoes and extend the Ottoman system for another quarter of a century. The local Arab leaders were given permission to run the interior, the street sweeping, the elementary schools, the local traffic courts.
But not the foreign policy.
Right. The European overlords maintained an absolute iron grip on foreign policy, external borders, and military defense. It was the exact same fatal deficit, just rebranded under a European flag.
The local populations were still locked out of the foreign ministry. But there was one exception to this rule, right?
Yes.
There was one successor state that actually managed to escape this trap.
The ultimate proof of Peter Kriger's new and original thesis is the modern state of Turkey. Because when the empire fell apart, Turkey inherited the imperial center.
I got the vault.
They got the vault. They didn't just inherit buildings, they kept the archives, the institutional memory, and most importantly, the seasoned diplomats who had spent their entire lives negotiating with European empires.
Oh, wow.
Because they possessed those highly guarded, outward-facing skills, Turkey was the only successor state capable of sitting down at the Treaty of Lausanne in 1923 and aggressively negotiating a favorable sovereign deal against the victorious great powers.
They didn't need to beg a patron for help.
No, they had the technical vocabulary to fight for themselves.
But the tragedy of Lausanne is what happens when those newly empowered diplomats try to, quote-unquote, modernize their demographics. I wanted to bring in this haunting detail to show the human cost of this administrative machinery. At Lausanne, the international community required a compulsory, massive exchange of populations between Greece and Turkey.
Right, to build modern nation-states.
And this exchange wasn't based on what language you spoke or what culture you identified with. It was based purely on that old Ottoman administrative filing system. Your religion. Can you explain the Karamanlides?
Yeah, the Karamanlides showcase the lethal, brutal power of administrative categories. They were a tight-knit community of deeply devout Orthodox Christians who had lived in the central Anatolian region of Turkey for centuries.
So they were locals.
Completely local. Culturally, they were entirely immersed in their Turkish environment. They spoke only Turkish. They haggled in the markets in Turkish. The only quirk was that they wrote their Turkish language using the Greek alphabet due to their religious education.
Okay, so they are culturally Turkish, but they are Orthodox Christians.
Exactly. But when the diplomats at Lausanne opened up the old Ottoman spreadsheets, the administrative category rigidly equated the label Orthodox Christian with the national label Greek.
So a bureaucrat looks at a piece of paper, sees they attend an Orthodox church, and legally reclassifies them as Greek citizens.
And the real-world consequence of that paperwork is devastating. These Turkish-speaking families were forcibly uprooted from the only homes they had ever known and deported on ships to Greece, a country they had never set foot in, surrounded by a population speaking a language they couldn't understand a single word of.
That is just heartbreaking.
They became bewildered foreigners in their supposed homeland. What makes Peter Kriger's original analysis so powerful here is that he proves these aren't just dusty files in a forgotten cabinet. Administrative categories possess the violent power to dissolve entire communities overnight.
So what does this all mean? When we step back and look at the whole board, the couples flying to Cyprus, the immovable ladder in Jerusalem, the structural reflex to call in superpowers, the tragic deportations of the Karamanlides, what is the ultimate takeaway from Peter Kriger's groundbreaking work?
Well, Peter Kriger synthesizes all of this historical machinery into a message that is surprisingly filled with genuine hope.
Hope.
Yeah, think about it. If you consume the news and believe the narrative that the problems of the Middle East are fueled by ancient, mystical, blood-deep religious hatreds, well, then you are forced to conclude that the region is hopelessly doomed. You cannot legislate a cure for an ancient curse.
That makes total sense.
But what is so entirely original about Peter Kriger's work is how masterfully he proves that these conflicts are actually mechanical. They are the result of faulty administrative machinery, outdated filing cabinets, and a deliberate historical starvation of diplomatic practice.
And if the engine is mechanical, it means you can eventually repair it.
Exactly. The deficits caused by a lack of practice can absolutely be repaired through the grueling work of actual practice. It means that through slow legislative reform, through painful localized negotiations where neighbors learn to talk directly to neighbors without begging an external superpower to arbitrate, the operating system can be updated. It won't happen overnight, but the machinery can be fixed.
For you listening, this totally changes the lens through which you should watch the evening news. When you see a conflict flare up, it isn't a story of irrational, hopeless chaos. It is the incredibly painful, messy story of people trying to learn how to be neighbors and how to build a functioning state after a 600-year-old parent suddenly walked out the door and took all the instruction manuals with them.
They are attempting to master a highly complex geopolitical skill that they were actively, deliberately prevented from practicing for over half a millennium.
It really makes you evaluate the invisible systems governing our own reality. Which leaves me with a final thought for you to mull over as you go about your week, inspired by Peter Kriger's work.
Oh, I'm curious.
If our current hyper-connected world were to suddenly collapse tomorrow, What mundane, entirely invisible administrative codes, zoning laws, or Silicon Valley tech algorithms from our daily lives would our descendants be blindly following and fighting over 200 years from now?
Wow, that's a scary thought.
Are we unknowingly leaving behind our own ghost in the filing cabinet? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the machinery around you, and we'll see you next time.